The phone buzzed in my black purse as the priest finished the final blessing over Roberto's casket. I almost ignored it. Who sends text messages during a funeral? But something compelled me to glance at the screen, while my children Eduardo and Sophia sobbed dramatically beside me. Unknown number. The message made my blood freeze. Teresa, I'm alive. I'm not in that coffin. I stared at the words, certain I was having some kind of grief-induced hallucination. My husband of 37 years had died of a heart attack 3 days ago. I had identified his body at the hospital. I had planned this funeral. But the next message shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning had started like the worst day of my life should start. Gray skies over the cemetery in San Gabriel, California, and a gathering of faces that should have brought comfort, but somehow felt wrong. Eduardo and Sophia had insisted on handling all the funeral arrangements, claiming they wanted to spare me the burden during my grief. I had been grateful for their help. At 72, after watching my husband collapse in our kitchen and spending 3 days in a hospital waiting room, I felt too exhausted to argue about flower choices or burial plots. But standing beside Roberto's grave, watching my children perform their grief with theatrical precision, something nagged at me. They seemed more concerned with impressing the funeral guests than comforting their mother. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Don't react. Act normal. They're watching you. I looked around the small gathering of mourners. Eduardo's wife, Carmen, was checking her phone constantly. Sophia kept glancing at her watch. Even my own children seemed more interested in when the ceremony would end than in saying goodbye to their father. That's when I realized I might not be the only one receiving mysterious messages. I managed to keep my composure through the rest of the service, accepting condolences and thanks from neighbors who had known Roberto for decades. But as soon as the crowd began to disperse, I walked to my car and typed a response to the unknown number. Who is this? The reply came immediately. I can't say. They have people watching. Meet me at our spot tonight. Midnight. Come alone. Our spot. Only Roberto knew about our spot. The small park bench beside the lake where we used to walk every Sunday morning before the children woke up. We had shared 37 years of dreams and fears on that bench. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling. Either someone was playing a cruel joke on a grieving widow, something impossible was happening. How do I know you're really my husband? You have a scar on your right shoulder from when you fell off your bike trying to impress me in 1987. You've never told anyone how you got it because you were embarrassed. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the car floor. Roberto was the only person who knew that story. I had fallen off my bike during our 2nd year of marriage, trying to prove I could keep up with him on our weekend rides. The scar was small but permanent, hidden under my clothing. No one else knew about it, not even my children. But if Roberto was alive, then who was in that coffin? I drove home from the cemetery in a daze, my mind racing through the events of the past 3 days. I had been so devastated by Roberto's collapse that I hadn't questioned the details my children had handled. Eduardo had driven me to the hospital while Sophia called the ambulance. By the time I arrived, Roberto was already in the emergency room, and the medical team was working to save him. I remembered sitting in that awful waiting room for what felt like hours, praying for my husband's life. But now, trying to remember the exact sequence of events, I realized there were gaps in my memory. Long periods where Eduardo and Sophia had handled communications with the doctors while I sat in shock. I parked in my driveway and sat in the car, forcing myself to recall every detail I could remember. The doctor who had delivered the news of Roberto's death. I couldn't remember his face clearly. He had spoken to Eduardo and Sophia first. Then they had brought me into a small office to tell me that Roberto was gone. I had asked to see his body, but Eduardo had insisted it was too traumatic for me. Let us handle this, Mama, he had said. You shouldn't have to see him like that. At the funeral home, the casket had been closed. Dad wouldn't want people to see him this way, Sophia had explained. Let everyone remember him as he was. I had never actually seen Roberto's body after he collapsed. Everything I knew about his death had come through my children. Every medical update, every decision, every detail of the past 3 days had been filtered through Eduardo and Sophia. As I sat in my driveway, the terrible possibility began to take shape in my mind. What if my children had lied to me about everything? I couldn't wait until midnight. By 6 p.m., I was back at the cemetery, approaching Roberto's grave with a small flashlight and a bouquet of roses as my cover story in case anyone saw me. The burial plot looked normal, a mound of fresh earth covered with the flowers from the morning service. But something about the proportions bothered me. The grave seemed smaller than it should be for a full casket. I knelt beside the headstone, pretending to arrange flowers while I examined the disturbed earth more carefully. The mound was too shallow, too narrow. If Roberto's casket was really buried here, it had been placed very close to the surface. My phone buzzed again. Teresa, get away from there. It's not safe. I typed back quickly. If you're really Roberto, prove it. Tell me something only we would know. Our first apartment had a leaky faucet in the kitchen that dripped every 3 seconds. You used to count the drips to fall asleep when you were worried about money. You never told me you did that, but I knew because I counted them too. I started crying right there beside his grave. It was Roberto. Somehow, impossibly, my husband was alive and communicating with me through text messages. But that meant my children had buried someone else in this grave. Roberto, what happened to you? Where are you? I can't explain over text. Too dangerous. Meet me at midnight, like I said. But Teresa, listen carefully. Don't trust Eduardo and Sophia. They're not who you think they are. I looked around the empty cemetery, suddenly feeling like I was being watched. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the headstones, and every bush and tree seemed to hide potential observers. I gathered my flowers and walked quickly back to my car, my mind reeling with questions. If Roberto was alive, why was he hiding? Who was buried in his grave? And most terrifyingly, what had my own children done? I had never been to the lake park at midnight before. The place that had been so peaceful and romantic during our Sunday morning walks felt eerie and threatening in the darkness. I sat on our bench, clutching my phone and a small flashlight, jumping at every sound. The text had said midnight, but it was now 12:15, and there was no sign of Roberto. Then I heard footsteps approaching from the path behind me. Teresa? I turned around, and my heart stopped. It was Roberto, thinner than before, with a beard he had never worn during our marriage, but unmistakably my husband. Roberto? I whispered, standing up from the bench. He approached cautiously, constantly looking around as if expecting to be followed. When we were close enough to touch, I could see that he looked exhausted and frightened. Mi amor, he said softly, taking my hands. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I touched his face, needing to confirm that he was real. Roberto, what happened? Everyone thinks you're dead. I buried you today. Teresa, we need to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be very hard to hear. We sat on our bench, and Roberto began to explain the impossible. 3 days ago, I didn't have a heart attack. I was drugged. Drugged? By whom? By Eduardo and Sophia. The words hit me like a physical blow. Roberto, that's impossible. They're our children. They love us. Teresa, they're not our children. I stared at him in the darkness, trying to process what he had just said. What do you mean they're not our children? I mean Eduardo and Sophia are not the babies we adopted 32 years ago. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Eduardo and Sophia had been in our lives since they were infants. We had raised them, loved them, sacrificed for them. They were our family. Roberto, you're not making sense. Listen to me carefully. 3 months ago, I started noticing things about Eduardo and Sophia that didn't add up. Small things at first. They didn't remember events from their childhood that they should have remembered. They made references to places and people they had never known. I thought about recent conversations with my children, trying to remember if I had noticed anything strange. Then I found something in Eduardo's car, Roberto continued. Documents with different names, different social security numbers. Teresa, The people we think are our children have been living under false identities. But why? Why would they pretend to be our children? Because 32 years ago, when we adopted Eduardo and Sophia, we also inherited a trust fund that our real children were supposed to receive when they turned 30. The trust fund. I had almost forgotten about it. Money that Roberto's wealthy uncle had left specifically for our adopted children to be distributed when they reached adulthood. Roberto, what happened to our real children? His face crumpled with grief. I don't know, Teresa. I've been trying to find out, but 3 days ago, when I confronted Eduardo about the documents I found, they decided I had become too dangerous. That's when I understood the magnitude of what had been stolen from us. Roberto, how are you alive? What happened when you collapsed? I didn't collapse from a heart attack. Eduardo put something in my coffee that morning, something that made me unconscious, but didn't kill me. When I woke up, I was in the back of a van, and I could hear Eduardo and Sophia talking about how to dispose of my body. I gripped his hand tighter, horrified by what I was hearing. I managed to escape while they were arguing about their plan. I've been hiding in an abandoned warehouse downtown ever since, trying to figure out how to contact you safely. But the funeral, the body in the casket, I don't know who they buried, Teresa. Maybe someone from the morgue, maybe someone they killed. All I know is that they needed you to believe I was dead so they could take control of our asset. I thought about the past 3 days, how Eduardo and Sophia had insisted on handling everything while I grieved. How they had encouraged me to sign papers to make the legal process easier. How they had talked about selling the house and helping me move to something more manageable. Roberto, I think I signed documents that gave them access to our bank accounts. What kind of documents? I don't remember exactly. Eduardo said they were related to the funeral expenses and settling your estate. I was so upset that I just signed whatever they put in front of me. Roberto's face grew grim. Teresa, we need to get to the house right now. If they think you're becoming suspicious, they might accelerate their plan. What plan? The plan to eliminate the only witness who could expose their fraud. I realized I was in danger from the people I had called my children for 32 years. We drove to my house in Roberto's borrowed pickup truck, taking back roads to avoid being seen. As we approached our neighborhood in San Gabriel, Roberto turned off the headlights and coasted to a stop 3 blocks away. Teresa, I want you to stay in the truck while I check the house. No, Roberto, we do this together. We walked through the darkness toward our home of 23 years, the house where we had raised Eduardo and Sophia, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays and graduations. From the outside, everything looked normal, but as we got closer, I could see light coming from the kitchen window and the shadows of people moving around inside. They're in our house, I whispered. Roberto pulled out a small pair of binoculars and peered through the kitchen window. Teresa, there are 4 people in there. Eduardo, Sophia, and 2 other people I don't recognize. What are they doing? It looks like they're packing. There are boxes and suitcases everywhere. I felt a surge of anger. While I had been grieving my husband's death, the people I thought were my children had been in my house, stealing my possessions and planning their escape. Roberto, we need to call the police. Not yet. We need evidence first. No one is going to believe that our children of 32 years are actually imposters without proof. Roberto handed me the binoculars. Through the kitchen window, I could see Eduardo directing 2 strangers as they loaded our valuables into boxes. Sophia was at my computer, probably accessing our financial accounts. But what I saw next made me gasp out loud. On my kitchen table were several passports spread open, each with a different name and photograph. Eduardo and Sophia were looking at them, apparently choosing new identities for their escape. Roberto, they have multiple passports. This isn't their first time doing this. We're dealing with professional criminals, Teresa, people who specialize in identity theft and long-term cons. As we watched, one of the strangers picked up a photograph from my mantelpiece. Our family portrait from last Christmas. He said something to Eduardo, who laughed and threw the photo into a garbage bag. 32 years of what I had believed was family love, discarded like trash. I'm going in there, I said, starting toward the house. Teresa, no. It's too dangerous. Roberto, they stole our children. They stole our lives. They made me bury an empty coffin and grieve for my living husband. I'm not going to let them escape. I marched up to my own front door and rang the doorbell. The activity inside the house stopped abruptly. I could hear whispered voices and footsteps approaching the door. Eduardo opened it, his face showing surprise and something that might have been fear. Mama, what are you doing here? You should be home resting. This is my home, Eduardo. Or should I call you by your real name? His expression changed instantly, the mask of concern dropping away to reveal cold calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the fact that my husband is alive and you tried to kill him. Eduardo stepped backward into the house, and I could see Sophia and the two strangers freeze in the living room. Mama, you're obviously having some kind of breakdown. The stress of losing Papa. Stop lying to me, I said, pushing past him into my own house. I know who you really are. I know about the false identities, the stolen trust fund, the 32 years of deception. Sophia approached from the living room, her face showing the same cold mask that Eduardo wore. Teresa, you're being hysterical. We're going to call a doctor to help you. Call whoever you want, I said. But first, I want you to explain who's buried in Roberto's grave. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. You want the truth? Eduardo said, his voice now completely different. Harder, more calculating, in an accent I had never heard before. Fine. You want the truth. Sophia moved to stand beside him, and I could see that both of them had transformed into people I didn't recognize. The loving children I had raised for 32 years had disappeared, replaced by cold strangers. The truth is that Eduardo and Sophia Morales died in a car accident when they were 3 years old. Eduardo said, we took their identities and became your children because you and Roberto represented easy access to a very comfortable life. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Our children are dead? Your children have been dead for 29 years, Sophia said with no emotion in her voice. We've been playing the role of your loving son and daughter ever since. But the memories, the childhood, the love, all performed, Teresa. We're very good at what we do. I thought about 32 years of hugs, birthday celebrations, graduation ceremonies, Christmas mornings. Every moment of love I had felt for these people had been based on a lie. Who are you really? We're professionals, the man I had known as Eduardo said. We specialize in long-term identity theft and family infiltration. You and Roberto weren't our first targets, and you won't be our last. How many families have you destroyed? We don't keep count, Sophia said, but we've been very successful at what we do. One of the strangers in my living room spoke up. We need to finish this and get out of here. The schedule is already behind. Finish what? I asked. Eduardo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Finish the job, Teresa. Roberto was supposed to die 3 days ago, but he escaped. And unfortunately, you've learned too much to be allowed to live. That's when I realized I might not survive this confrontation. Teresa, get down. Roberto's voice came from behind me as he burst through the front door, followed by 4 police officers with their weapons drawn. Police! Everyone on the ground. The people I had known as Eduardo and Sophia immediately ran in different directions. Eduardo headed for the back door while Sophia tried to escape through the living room window. The 2 strangers put their hands up and dropped to their knees. I crouched behind my own couch while police officers chased my fake children through my house, finally understanding that the past 32 years of my life had been a carefully constructed lie. Roberto knelt beside me as the police established control of the scene. How did you know to call them? I asked. I've been investigating this for months, Teresa. When I escaped from the van, I contacted the FBI. Eduardo and Sophia, their real names are Marcus and Diana Walsh, are wanted in connection with similar frauds in 6 other states. I watched as police officers handcuffed the people who had called me Mama for 3 decades, and felt a grief deeper than anything I had experienced when I thought Roberto was dead. Roberto, our real children. I know, mi amor, we'll never get to meet them, never get to love them, never get to see who they would have become. As the police led Marcus and Diana away, Diana, the woman I had known as Sophia, looked back at me. Teresa, if it makes you feel better, you were good parents to us, better than our real parents ever were. But it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel like 32 years of my life had been stolen along with my children. 6 months later, Roberto and I sat in a therapist's office in Pasadena, trying to rebuild our understanding of our own lives. The people we had known as Eduardo and Sophia, Marcus and Diana Walsh, had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The FBI had discovered that they were part of a larger criminal organization that specialized in targeting families who had recently adopted children. They would murder the real children and take their places, gaining access to inheritance money, trust funds, and decades of financial support. We learned that our real Eduardo and Sophia had been killed when Marcus and Diana were teenagers themselves, recruited into this criminal enterprise by adults who had taught them how to infiltrate and exploit families. Mrs. Morales, our therapist, said, "How are you processing the knowledge that the people you loved as your children were actually responsible for murdering your real children?" It was a question I still couldn't answer. How do you grieve for children you never got to know while also grieving for the fake children you loved for 32 years? I think, I said slowly, that I'm learning to separate the love I felt from the people who received it. The love was real, even if they weren't. Roberto took my hand. We gave 32 years of our lives to people who didn't deserve it, but we also gave 32 years of love, and that love was genuine. The hardest part was accepting that we would never know who our real Eduardo and Sophia might have become. We would never see their faces as adults, never celebrate their real achievements, never hold their children, but we had survived. We had exposed a criminal enterprise that had been destroying families for decades, and we had each other. Roberto, I said as we left the therapist's office, do you ever regret that we adopted children instead of having biological children? No, Teresa. I regret that our adopted children were murdered before we could love them. But I don't regret choosing to love children who needed family. We drove home to the house that no longer felt violated, that we had reclaimed and made safe again. On the mantelpiece where our fake family photos used to sit, we had placed a small memorial for the real Eduardo and Sophia, the children we had never met, but would love forever. That evening, as we sat on our couch watching the sunset through our living room window, I realized that surviving betrayal on this scale had taught me something important about the nature of love and family. Love is not diminished by being misdirected. Family is not defined by biology or even by truth. It's defined by the choice to care for each other consistently and genuinely. Marcus and Diana had stolen our money, our identities, and our real children, but they had not been able to steal our capacity to love or our commitment to each other. Roberto and I were still a family. We were still capable of love, and perhaps in the years we had left together, we might find other ways to share that love with people who truly deserved it. The woman who buried her husband 6 months ago no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood that the most important things in life, love, loyalty, trust, cannot be faked forever and cannot be truly stolen unless you allow them to be. Tonight, Roberto and I would make plans for the future. Tomorrow, we would continue the work of rebuilding our lives on a foundation of truth instead of lies. And for the first time in 32 years, we would do it knowing exactly who we were and who we were choosing to love.